Hey everybody, I'm Jack Rita, and I'm a game designer with Future Pastimes. And recently I was at AwesomeCon, and someone asked me how I got into board gaming in general, and then specifically into board game design. So I thought I'd talk about that in today's video, just give a little bit of background to my bizarre journey into the world of board gaming, and ultimately into getting to design games as well. So for me, it started back in the mid-1980s when I was in middle school in Detroit. And I went to a pretty interesting middle school that had a program on the last class of every Friday was something called SIS, or School-Wide Independent Study. And it was actually this really bizarre program where the teachers could basically teach anything they wanted. And you would sign up for that for like a semester. And so that was your class. And the first one that I signed up for was a class in reading and discussing horror literature, which I was always been fascinated in. But my friend John had signed up for the class on Dungeons and Dragons, and he wouldn't stop talking about it, and it fascinated me. And my family went on a winter vacation that year, and I saw Dungeons and Dragons in a store, so I bought the monster manual and the basic box and just started reading it. And I ended up taking that class at the middle school, and it was a 4-year middle school, so I took it as many times as I could over the course of 4 years. And it was the civics teacher who taught that class. He also taught another class periodically on how to paint lead miniatures that we would use for Dungeons and Dragons. So I took that class as well. So during this time in middle school, my other friends and I, we would get together and we would play Dungeons and Dragons. And one of our friends, Greg, said, well, I have other games as well, so let's try that out. And the first game that he showed us was Dune. And I hadn't read Dune. I didn't know anything about it at the time. And but we thought this was an amazing game, and we played it a lot. So we used to get together at least once a week, sometimes for sleepovers at Greg, that we would not sleep at all, stay up all night playing Dungeons and Dragons or Dune or both. Occasionally, we would also play Diplomacy. And then one day he showed up and he had Cosmic Encounter, which he said was from the same guys who played Dune. And at that point, that was all we played going forward. So that was my first real introduction to games that that captured my imagination, that I thought, this is all I want to do. And from there, I started to realize, oh yeah, there's a lot of other games. So we played a few Steve Jackson games, like Illuminati, and a number of other little small games that I don't even remember what they're called. And then in high school, I moved to Virginia, and I found like-minded friends. I introduced them to Cosmic Encounter, and we played that a lot, as well as some other games. But Cosmic was still the number one game. And it was right around that time that I learned about Encounter magazine, which was something that the designers of Cosmic put out for a short period of time, where they talked about rules questions, and they talked about their other games, but they also published players' homebrew aliens. And so I started to dabble in that as well, and creating my own aliens for Cosmic Encounter. I also created my own factions for Dune. I had an Honored Matres faction because after I started playing Dune, I had to read it, and then I had to read all of the Dune books. So I think a lot of other fans of Dune went down that same track of homebrewing their own factions and dabbling in the game. But again, this was in the 1980s, where the quality of the product was rather poor. None of us really had computers, maybe an Apple IIe, when we weren't making components that looked close enough to the real thing that people had a hard time telling the difference. Now, this is all hand-drawn and cut out with scissors. So it was a pretty pale imitation of the sorts of dabbling I was able to do much, much later. But Cosmic Encounter, homebrewing, really captured my imagination. In the 90s, when the Mayfair version of Cosmic came out, it created a resurgence in Cosmic for all of my friends and myself, and we played it a lot more. We loved that there was more stuff and new stuff. So that primarily was the reason why we switched from the Eon edition over to the Mayfair edition was just because there was more stuff. And a lot of the stuff had slightly better production qualities. Like the moons were much better and the lucre was much better. The art was not much better, but we tried to look past that. But it was at this time that I discovered the news group, the Alt-Rec Board Game CE news group, where people were posting a lot more ideas, a lot of new homebrew aliens, but new cards as well. And then some lunatic posted the postscript files so that you could print out stuff that looked a lot better than hand-drawn and cut out with scissors. So my friend Marcus exploited his office where he worked, and we spent a lot of time there just printing out hundreds and hundreds of everything we could find, all of the stuff that was posted to the news group, all of my homebrew stuff. And then I started to hunt around for more things on the internet. Eventually, that led me to creating my own Cosmic Encounter website, because I was tired of bugging other people about posting my ideas on their websites. So the Warp was born, and it became a warehouse and storing facility and archives and everything else I could pack into it with Marcus's help. And we had the alien database, and I scoured the internet for everybody's homebrew aliens. I went through every issue of Encounter magazine and painstakingly typed it all up into our Warp alien database. And then I kept coming up with more and more stuff. And at some point I felt like, oh, the Warp needs to be colossal in terms of content. So I just kept thinking up more stuff to put on there. And then eventually I came across Board Game Geek. And at that time, this is, in the early 2000s, I was cultivating a much larger board game collection, and I was always dabbling in coming up with custom expansions for my board games. And anytime I would play a game, I would think about how I would expand it if I had been given the chance, and made a lot of that stuff. And I noticed that other people on Board Game Geek were posting their own comparable ideas, and that the production quality of things started to really go up. You could print out stuff that looked just like, the stuff that was published. You could find the fonts or a close enough font to really make stuff look a lot better. And that motivated me to create more and more content and post it on Board Game Geek and share it with other people. And that was became a passion of mine. Somewhere in between creating the Warp and posting onto Board Game Geek, I got onto the radar of Future Pastimes, because they love to engage with the fan base of Cosmic Encounter, and I was self-proclaimed #1 fan of Cosmic Encounter. So we started correspondence, and they had their Cosmic Encounter Online, which I was a participant in and played that quite a bit. It was great that you could play it solo. So that was nice, even though it was a very stripped down version of it, just 4 planets. There were no flares. None of the other bells and whistles, but new aliens and stuff. So it was a nice diversion from the drudgery of day to day, especially if I couldn't get enough people to play Cosmic Encounter in real life, which, it happens sometimes. But we became friends, and we talked a lot. And then when Fantasy Flight got the license to publish Cosmic Encounter, by that point, Kevin Wilson knew who I was because of my fandom and his research into trying to make the best version of Cosmic Encounter for Fantasy Flight. So the Warp was a useful tool for him, and he and I started a correspondence, and he would let me sit in on his design thoughts and run stuff by me. What do you think of this? And I would say, well, here's what I like about it. Here's another version of that I think might be better. He's like, oh, great. So that happened a lot. I got to contribute to Cosmic Encounter in an official capacity, and keep Cosmic Encounter alive, which again, it made the guys at Future Pastimes very happy to see Cosmic Encounter getting that treatment. So, and then I just got more and more involved in what went on with Cosmic Encounter, just because I was such a big fan and an aficionado. and more a contributor and a designer for it. And then in my conversations with Future Pastimes, they would talk about, well, this is another game that we're working on, or here's something else that we're looking at. And I would give them my 2 cents, and they really liked my input, my ideas for that, and impressed with a lot of the other homebrew stuff that I had done. And I consulted briefly on the Dune republication for 2019. And then right around then was when they started to get together for conventions like Escape Velocity, so we all got to meet in person. And we'd met at Cosmic Con earlier, which was nice as well. And we got to talking about design and Cosmic Encounter and possibilities of the future. And so it got into their craw that I might be a useful member of Future Pastimes, just because I was so full of energy and ideas, some of which were actually pretty good. And so they said, yeah, why don't you become an official member of it and help us with all the other stuff that we're working on. And so that was how I kind of got into it. And just being an enthusiastic designer, constantly creating stuff, but also playing a lot of games. And I think that's been a really important part of my development as a designer, is just getting exposed to a lot of what's out there. And I see a lot of stuff, and every time I see something new, it makes me think of something else new that is in the same vein or goes in a different direction. And so I like to experiment with that. I spend a lot of time just making up my own games and trying them out and subjecting my friends to them and learning from that. And some of those early ones, there was a fatal flaw in just about every one. But after one play test and identifying it, I was able to figure out a way to solve it that led to a better game. So that really helped me to see that playtesting is a critical component to design. And playtesters always give you their 2 cents, and sometimes it's a great idea that you're like, yeah, I see the light, let's definitely do that. And sometimes, again, it's a stepping stone. So you're like, I don't think that idea works, but it makes me think of something that will work, and that's a great part of the creative process. And that happens with us inside of Future Pastimes as well. So when we do all hunker down and start spitballing, it's a really wonderful thing because it doesn't always strike lightning right away, but it builds up a lot of static electricity, and we bounce off each other and eventually get to what we think is a really good idea and a lot of fun. So I've learned a lot from the other guys at Future Pastimes. They're kind of the overlords of board gaming for me. They really kicked off a lot of what exists in board gaming now that a lot of people don't even realize. And their early games were so diverse. You know, Cosmic and Dune have a little bit of overlap in terms of its variable player power and its asymmetrical play. But then, you know, they did the Runes, which are these clever word games, and they did Hoax, which was a really interesting, you know, trying to guess who the hidden traitor sort of thing that predates games like Coup, and a lot of other really innovative stuff. So for me, it's a treat to be able to just be in the same virtual room with them and hearing the ideas and hearing how they think outside of the box, and they live outside of the box, which is great. So it's really helped me as well. And then since I've been playing every game I can get my hands on for the past 30 years, I'm bringing that in as well and helping to mix the old with the new and come up with something original or a better version of an old classic, which is kind of what we did with Borderlands, which is one of their very innovative games from 1980 that we've reimagined as Arrakis and with the Dune theme. And it's a much, much better game with all of the new stuff that we've added to it. And it wasn't just like I came in and said, do all these new things. It was an organic process, and it evolved, and it just got better and better. And playtesters contributed ideas to that as well. So it's a really great system. So if you're looking to get into board gaming, you're probably already into board gaming if you're watching this. But if you're looking to get into designing it, hang out with other designers. That helps, certainly. Keep trying stuff out, play test it, and then, yeah, collaborate. Collaborate with people. Seek their input, but let it inspire you to come up with something else. I still play Dungeons and Dragons, and with some of my friends from high school, and I still play Cosmic Encounter and Dune as much as I can. Plus, I like a lot of new games as well. So I love board gaming. I love to learn new games when I go out to a game night. But I bring the games that I would want to play, and I leave it out there. And if you want to play these games, that's great. But I'm happy to get something new. Don't always love the new stuff that I see, but there's almost always something interesting about that game, some mechanism that is worth filing away and seeing how to play around in that design space later on. So that's it for this one. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and tell me about your evolution into board gaming. Like I said, mine started back in like 1980, 81, somewhere around there. And yeah, I still do it, and don't plan to stop anytime soon. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.